Well, hello and welcome back to the Prison Officer Podcast. My name's Mike Cantrell. I'm glad you've come back and joined us. Got a lot of stuff to cover today. I've been doing a bunch of stuff and I want to share it with you. A lot of it has to do with things that are happening in corrections, big improvements, things I'm excited to be part of. So I'm going to go through a whole list of stuff and we'll discuss each one of them. The first thing I want to start off with, of course, is Pepperball. And I want to thank Pepperball. I think they've been our sponsor here for more than 3 years. So they're what keeps the lights on and keep the podcast going, and I appreciate their sponsorship. If you get the chance, I know that Pepperball is going to be out at the Mock Riot in Moundsville, West Virginia, May 5th through 7th. So if you're out there and get the chance to go visit the Mock Riot, go say hi to Ronnie and Sharon. They're the ones that set up the Mock Riot for everyone and keep it going, and I'm very happy to know them. But Pepperball will have a booth set up, and so stop by the booth and talk to Carl. I think Will's going out there, maybe Joe, and stop by and talk to them and thank them for sponsoring the podcast. I would appreciate that if you would mention it to them. So if you get the chance, stop by and thank Pepperball. I'm also teaching some Pepperball classes coming up pretty soon. I've got one in April, Williston, North Carolina. Or North Dakota, my fault. Williston, North Dakota. Then I got another one in Taos, New Mexico coming up. And then Samarkand Training Academy in North Carolina. So if you're interested in one of those classes, go to www.pepperball.com. That's our sponsor. And check out the training schedule. And I'd love to see you in one of the classes. So another big thing that happened this year for me, and I think for corrections, I got invited to I've been a member of ILEETA for quite a while, the International Law Enforcement Educators and Trainers Association. So I've been doing that for quite a while. I think I wrote my first article for the journal back in 2014. So I got invited to come in and be part of the advisory board on corrections. So I'm very thrilled to be part of that, bring a little bit of my knowledge, my experience, what I learned from you guys, and bring that there for them to bring corrections into the fold, I guess is the way I'll say it. ILEETA is a great organization. It's been around for a long time, but their focus has kind of been law enforcement. They realize that corrections has kind of been off here to the side, and they want to bring them into the fold. And I guess what I'll say first is, the vendors and the classes that I saw, a large portion of those affect correctional trainers just as much as law enforcement trainers. So ILEETA is a good organization as it is. I'm not going to say ILEETA is getting improved by bringing corrections in. It's a great organization, but we just want to add some specific correctional stuff. But I mean, if Force Science Institute, that works whether you work in corrections or whether you're working in law enforcement, understanding use of force, the science behind use of force. And if you guys never looked them up, they're great. I got to sit through one of Von Klime's Graham versus Connor, A New Perspective, I think was the name of the class that I got to sit through. And it was wonderful. I absolutely learned a lot there. But classes like that at that level and the instructors that I got to see while I was there, people I've heard about for a long time. So it was great to do that, be part of that. Part of what they asked us to do was to hold a panel on corrections and invite people in to discuss what ILEETA, to encourage more membership from corrections and more correctional people attending the conference. So myself, David McRoberts, who's a retired correctional captain from Wisconsin, and he works as a correctional consultant now. Works with companies that build hardened, fortified facilities for corrections. So he's got a lot of knowledge. Gary York was on the panel, and a lot of you know Gary York. He's been on a couple of our episodes. I've been on his podcast. He's an author, and he's also the host of True Prison Stories. So Gary was on there. And then a new friend, which I hadn't met before, and I hope I don't tear up his name too bad, but it's Ron Scheidt, Cheidt. And he's a longtime probation and parole officer and advocate and correctional advocate. So those were the four people they put on the discussion panel. And then we had two different times, one on Monday and one on Friday, where corrections was invited, or everybody was invited. But we ended up with a lot of correctional officers, detention officers, probation and parole officers, instructors from everywhere across corrections were there. Even a representative from risk management who who insures jails and counties. And that was very interesting to talk to him. But so we listened and we took notes, and we're planning on how we can improve the corrections portions of ILEETA next year. Of course, one of the things we came up with or asked about was what needs to be developed. And people were pretty much in agreement. There's a lot of stuff out there, duty to intervene, anything that has to do with retention, recruitment, that type of stuff, risk and liability management, use of force, Correctional Training Officer, which I'll talk about a little bit more about something there here in a minute. But those were all classes and subjects that people wanted to see more of in the correctional, scope of training. We also talked a lot about, I feel, and you guys may disagree, you may see something different than what I do. I feel like law enforcement gets a lot more opportunities at true leadership training. And I'm talking good leadership training, not what somebody at your agency just comes in and puts a PowerPoint together for 2 hours, which is what I got for a long time. So leadership training from outside sources, from people who have led and understand and are students of it. So they talked about doing some of that with correction-specific leadership classes. So it was a good time. I enjoyed ILEETA. If you've never been there, now ILEETA is just not the conference. There's a whole bunch of resources. When you can go on ILEETA.org, I believe. I'll put the link in the show notes to make sure I get it right. But you can go to ILEETA, and there's resources there. You get the journal, the ILEETA journal, 4 times a year, and that is a great resource. It's written by some of the top trainers, Todd Fletcher, Miles Cook. I mean, there's just a ton of people that are out there in the training world who write articles for the ILEETA journal. I've written, I think, 4 or 5 myself. So it's a great resource. And then once a year, they have the ILEETA conference, and that's held in St. Louis at the Union Station. I think there were 120 vendors, and I heard from somebody that there were almost 700 participants. I don't know the number of classes, but what I really liked, and I didn't get to go to everything I wanted because I was teaching classes also, but one of the things that I liked was you can just go to any class you want. You just pick what you feel like you need, and the classes are open, except if there's certification. I mean, if you're getting a certification, you have to sign up for those ahead of time, and you have to meet the requirements of the class. But I know there's at least 100 classes there that are just open, and you can just go learn from some of the best. And if it's not what you want that day, you can get up and go to another class. But it was a really great format, and I enjoyed it. I went to several classes, as many as I could. I got to see the vendors. I spent a day helping work the booth with the guys at Command Presence. So we had a great time. I learned a lot, got to see a lot of what's out there. Some shooting systems. Like, of course, I knew Milo. I'd been around Milo, but there were some others out there, virtual reality type stuff that I found really cool. There's, what do you call them, radio controlled, like robots with cameras that were really neat. So there's a bunch of stuff out there that I had not seen at SHOT Show or that I hadn't seen at the Mock Riot. So check it out. Check out ILEETA. If you're a correctional trainer, you need to be part of it. You really do. It's going to give you access to some of the top trainers, firearms trainers, leadership trainers in the country. So I highly recommend it. And if you have any questions, shoot me an email and I'll help you with what I can. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about Command Presence. It's one of the companies I work for that I teach classes for. And earlier this year, we sat down and we talked about developing a Correctional Training Officer program. Now, Command Presence has a field training officer program for law enforcement, and it is great. We're so busy with it, sometimes it's hard to keep up and keep the instructors, they're just going constantly to teach this. I got to sit through one 4 weeks ago, I think it was, down in Louisiana, and I truly enjoyed that, getting to see how they set up that FTO program, the way Command Presence is approaching it with a coach, train, and evaluate. We saw when I was young, when I was coming up through corrections, it was ran more like basic training, as opposed to having somebody come up and talk to you about what they expect out of you and then show you what they expect out of you, give you an opportunity to do it, right, and succeed at it, and then evaluate you. I was used to, here's what you do, come back tomorrow, we're going to put you through this, and you get evaluated right there. And if you didn't do it, then, you did it again, and you did it again. And I really like this coach, train, evaluate method of the FTL program they have. So that's something we've been working on. I'm happy to announce that July, we're going to have that out, and I've got a couple of classes coming out. If you're interested, we're going to have a class in August in Ingham County, Michigan. It's a brand new. That's going to be the first Correctional Training Officer program. It's a three-day class, so come up there. I'd love for you to be part of that class. I've also got another one in September at Green Lake, Wisconsin, and love to see you at that one. If you get the chance, if you want to go to one of those, go to commandpresence.net. That's my company's that I work for. That's their website. Go check out commandpresence.net, and I'd love to see it one of those new CTO programs. Let's see what else. If you haven't been on Corrections 1 in the last week or so, jump on there. I just got a new article up. It's called The Culture of Compliance, Breaking Destructive Patterns in Correctional Facilities. And, we're talking about leadership failures and when that happens, how that culture can turn toxic. We're seeing a lot of that in the news. The New York officers who were involved in that use of force up there, I forget what they're up to. I think the last I looked, there was 18 that have been indicted on that. And that's the way these things work. When somebody does something wrong, the tentacles go out. I was involved in one of those one time. I wasn't even at work when the incident happened, but I had worked at Control Center a couple of weeks before. And so I was part of an investigation because of what someone else had done on a escorted trip to the hospital. And that's the bad thing. When one of our people does something wrong, there's tentacles that go out through there. And as part of the after actions, everybody's looking for blame. Everybody's looking to find out who made a mistake or who didn't do their job. And it's not always a good way to learn or change what was wrong. But I've been through that. So, how do we stop these cultures that don't seem to have a duty to intervene, that aren't watching their people and aren't watching out for each other? Because the supervisors aren't always there. Sometimes it's you and me. You have to remind the guy working next to you or the girl working next to you, this is how we do this job. This is the correct way. This is the professional way. This is what makes our agency look good. This is how we build good culture for everybody that works here. And sometimes that's mostly up to the individual. So anyway, if you get the chance, go to Corrections 1 and take a look at that article. I think you might like it. I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me an email if you read that article and got something from it. I've already got a couple of people who I've talked to that have some very strong opinions about duty to intervene. And that's a tough thing to do. It absolutely is. So what else? Well, I guess the big thing I want to talk about while we've got a moment, I want you guys to keep your eyes out, and I'll be putting out some stuff on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, and about my new book. So I've written a couple of books. You guys have seen those. I've talked about a couple of them on the podcast, but I'm really excited about the newest one. It's going to be called Power Skills, Emotional Intelligence and Soft Skills for Correctional Officers, First Responders, and beyond. And so why did I name it that way? Well, I got to sit through a class. I guess it's been almost a year ago. I sat through a class. Miles Cook gave that class, and he was talking about emotional intelligence. And I'm going to tell you the truth. I've sat through a bunch of classes and working for the DOC, working for the BOP, and most of the time they have, annual training. You got to sit through the plethora of mandated classes. And one of them they started putting in years ago was emotional intelligence. But it was always taught by a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And so here's this psychologist up in front of a class full of, penitentiary correctional officers talking about how I should be more empathetic, how I should get in touch with my feelings, how I should get in touch with the feelings of the inmates. And any of you that know, any of you that have been around for a long time, that doesn't necessarily ring well, right? It doesn't sound good to our ears. And we kind of become resistant to that because we're manipulated so much when you start talking about the word feelings, right? Correctional officers tend to push away from that. I don't have feelings at work. And I've said this for years. Somebody will say, I don't want to hurt your feelings. You can't hurt my feelings. I've got one feeling left, and it's hidden. And I've told people that for years. But so I never took emotional intelligence very serious. Okay. So I'm sitting through Miles's class, and he's talking about emotional intelligence as a way to understand feelings. It's not so much the empathy, although you have to have empathy in order to detect and to understand what's going on with others. But if you can understand another person's emotions and moods and what's driving them, it gives you, and this is what he called it, he said superpowers. And that was where I got power skills at. It gives you superpowers to understand the motivation of the people you're dealing with. And that can be staff, that can be your boss, that can be inmates, that can be children. But if you learn to understand what feelings are going on, now you can understand what emotions are driving their behaviors. Okay. And Miles called that a superpower. And I was just like, wow, I've never heard it put that way. I've never thought of it that way. So that was the first step. I talked to a warden friend of mine not too long after that, and she told me that we were talking about what staff need these days. And she said, well, one of the things that's missing the most is just basic soft skills. And I said, soft skills? And she's like, yeah, the ability to go have a conversation, communication, just basic communication, which is something I struggled with, believe it or not. Productivity, self-care, wellness, teamwork. Some of those skills that, I grew up with, it wasn't unusual for us to be forced by a parent when you went to church or when you went to school, and they'd kind of give you that nudge. Well, step up and say hi to Mrs. So-and-so. Or my dad, have you shaken Mr. So-and-so's hand yet? Those were skills that we were taught. And a lot of what's happened with the cell phone, the digital age, is that the younger generation has lost some of the ability. I know I just had a conversation not too long ago. Someone texted me, and I said, well, hey, give me a call tomorrow. I'll text you. I don't want to text when there's, 14 paragraphs of stuff to say. I said, no, just give me a call. Well, I don't like phone calls. How do you do business? How do you communicate if you can't call somebody and have a conversation? Not everything can be done through text. So these were some of the things that I saw. So I started writing this. I think it probably started as an article, and then I grew it to power skills, emotional intelligence and soft skills for correctional officers. And so I started telling my stories. This is how I learned. I'll tell you one. I never was very good at small talk, right? I just didn't have time for it. I was busy. I had things to do. There was work to do. And when I wasn't working, I was trying to figure out how to get things ready for the next day, or I was getting ready to go home. And then I had stuff to do at home. So I never had time for small talk, and it wasn't a big priority to me. And when I became a lieutenant, one of the things we did was walk around and make rounds. Make sure that your officers are doing okay, see if they need anything, talk to them for a few minutes, and I really was struggling with it. And I'll be honest, one of the things I struggled with, I guess I'm an unusual man. Pro sports doesn't really interest me a whole lot. I loved playing sports in high school. I competed in Highland games for years. I love being part of sports. I'll even jump in on a pickup game if somebody wants to. I like the activity. I like sports. I don't want to keep track of people's, free throw average. I don't want to keep track of their RBI. I don't want to know what teams win and what their game wins and losses this year is. It doesn't interest me. It's hard for me to sit still. I've got a friend that says I can't fish. I can't sit there like that. And I kind of feel the same way about sports. So I don't normally sit down in front of the TV and watch a sports game. So that was kind of a weakness, because what did most of the male officers, what did they use for small talk? And it was sports. They wanted to talk about sports, and so I haven't kept up on this, and I'm having trouble being part of that conversation. So becoming a new leader, one of the things I did, I had about a 20-minute drive to work, and I found an AM sports channel. And so one of the things I started doing on that 20-minute drive was every morning I tuned into that AM sports channel and listened to what they were talking about. And what that gave me was some small talk, right? Some small talk that I could, as I went through the day and I saw, hey, you need anything today? Everything going okay? How's family? And so won last night. I'm like, yeah, I heard that. They were playing so and so. And so I became better at small talk. So that's kind of some of the stuff, I learned. And that's what I put in here. How I overcame a lot of this stuff. How I learned some of it I didn't have to overcome. Some of it became naturally to me. But I had never put names to it before, right? Emotional intelligence isn't one thing. Emotional intelligence is several things put together. And the first one is self-awareness. Before you can become emotionally intelligent about other people and what they're feeling and what they're thinking and why their behaviors are the way they are, you have to understand why you do all that. You have to stop and take some time to become aware. What makes me tick? Why do I get up in the morning? Are my actions driving me forward? What desires do I have? What motivations do I have? And once you understand that about yourself, you learn to understand your own actions. So, that's one part of emotional intelligence. Another one is self-management, learning how to control, one thing I talk about is learning how to respond instead of react. I talk about the conversational thermostat, understanding the conversation, and as conversations go up in temperature, right? Being able to change that, being able to respond and not add more fuel to the fire. And as well as I do, if you've worked in a prison, that's what inmates try. They're on that door. They're trying to get you to trying to push your button, trying to get just the littlest bit of reaction out of you. Because if they can get that reaction out of you, they've overcome your ability to manage yourself, right? So self-management's part of emotional intelligence. Social awareness is part of emotional intelligence. What's social awareness? It's about looking inward and looking outward to understand and appreciate the feelings of others, the motivations of others. And sometimes it's not just motivations. Social awareness, you ever drive down the road and there's the old lady going to church in front of you and she's 15 miles an hour under the speed limit and you're just fuming? I don't know if everybody does this. I do. It drives me nuts. I can't stand driving 1 mile an hour under the speed limit. But social awareness is understanding that that person's not doing that towards you. That person may have trouble hearing, seeing, their motor skills, they're older, that type of stuff. Pregnant lady gets on a bus or an airplane, get up and give your seat. That's being socially aware to what someone else is going through. So that's another thing we talk about with emotional awareness. And then the last one is social management. And I actually talk about social relationships. How do you like that word when you're working in prison? You like the word relationships? Do you have relationships with inmates? I'm going to challenge you and say that you do. And being aware that there is a relationship there. And all people, all humans, like it or not, even if you're the biggest, toughest, oldest, nastiest, crabbiest correctional officer sitting in the back of the seg unit, you have emotions, you have feelings. Understanding that everybody has those and how to manage them, how to manage theirs, how to manage yours, is what makes you a good leader. And like it or not, everybody needs to be a leader. Every correctional officer, you've heard me talk about it on here, every correctional officer is a leader. If you don't understand that there are feelings out there, if you don't understand your feelings and their feelings, you're not going to be able to influence the people you work with. And I'm not talking about influencing them to get them to buy, you're not selling Amway here, but influencing them to work together as a team, to collaborate towards the same goal. And sometimes that same goal is nothing more than feeding trays on a seg unit today and getting done by 1:30 so that we can work on another project, right? Sometimes that's all it is. But if you don't understand people's motivations and be able to recognize those emotions, you're not going to have any influence with them. So that's some of the stuff we talk about, or I talk about. I say I talk about in the new book. I also go into leadership, absolutely. How we influence up and down the ladder, how we influence inmates, how we influence our peers, how we influence the public, how we can change culture. An individual can change culture. I've done it. I've absolutely done it in the prisons I've worked in. How you present yourself and how you work changes culture. I'm not saying that you can fix everything, but you can change culture. People will follow your lead if you're truly leading and you're influencing people and they know that you care. People will absolutely follow you. And you can change the culture. You can make it better on the shift, on the team, in the SEG unit, whatever it is you're working in booking, right? Another thing we talk about is communication. And when I talk about communication, it's not just you and I having a conversation. There's so many ways to communicate these days. Sorry. Texting. Is texting communication? Do we text as part of our jobs? Some of us do. Absolutely. What about phone calls? Is that communication? It is. What about emails? Do you guys take the time to send good emails? That's a big part of our communication these days. And they throw emails out there like they're texts. And I don't think we should do either one that way. If you're a professional and you're trying to set the example and you're trying to set culture at your institution, your agency, your jail, your prison, how you communicate matters. If you're using the letter U to say YOU, that says something about you and your professionalism when people are getting those emails. Learn how to write a good email. Learn how to use carbon copy, blind copy correctly. Okay? Learn about what to put in that email, how to review it, what you're looking for, how to walk away from emails. Most emails should not be sent the moment you write them. You should give it 5-10 minutes, maybe a day, maybe 2 days, especially if you're upset. Have somebody else read it. Have somebody else review it. Review other people's stuff and learn what good emails look like. It matters how you communicate. It absolutely does. We talk about productivity, how we do our job, how we prevent crisis, how we diffuse stuff. That's what a correctional officer does. But are we looking for time to make our agency and our housing unit and our shift better? Productivity is not a bad thing. And I almost feel like a lot of people have taken work and made it something to avoid. That comes from COVID when now we work at home. I want to work at home. Well, are you truly putting in 8 hours at home? I think we're finding out that a lot of people aren't. If you're working from home, you should still be doing the work. You should still be productive. And if you're at work, productivity matters. You're setting an example, not only for your peers, not only for the people working around you, but the inmates. I have had an inmate who came to me and he told me, and it actually meant a lot. He said, what he said was, don't you ever bang in? And I said, no, I rarely do. Unless there's something bad. If I bang in, something's wrong. He said, you're always here. You're always here early. He said, I've never seen anybody like that. I didn't grow up around people like that. The people I grew up around were always trying to figure out how not to go to work. Productivity matters. It's part of who we are. It makes us feel good about ourselves. It gives us a place for accomplishment. There's nothing wrong with it. We shouldn't avoid it. And then the final, I guess, thing that I'll touch on today is teamwork and collaboration. Are we good at working together in teams? Are we good at leading teams? Or when we all get together, and it's almost a statement on the nature of society right now. You put 5 people in a room and just ask them to communicate and come to a consensus, they can't hardly do it these days. Because every tiny piece of their feeling, every tiny piece of what they think is all that matters to them. And we've lost the ability to work as a team. We've lost the ability to collaborate. And collaborate is not a bad thing. You're not giving up your ideas. You're not giving up your thoughts. What you're doing is taking the best of each person in a group, taking the best of their ideas, taking the best of their way to do something, taking the best of each person and putting it in a product that makes everybody better, that makes the product better, that makes it easier for us to move forward and get the job done in an effective way. So that's another thing I talk about. Anyway, I won't tell you the whole book. I'm not going to sit here and read you the whole book, but I really enjoyed putting this together over the last year. It means a lot to me. It really does. And when I got done, I realized that's why I kind of changed the title to Correctional Officers, First Responders, and Beyond. Because what corrections, and I hear this all the time with law enforcement officers. If I could, they'll say, if I could, I would have every police officer work 6 months in the jail before they went to the street. Why is that? Well, it's because one thing you learn in a jail, one thing you learn in a prison is how to communicate and how to talk, right? There's not very much stuff on my duty belt when I'm inside a jail or inside a prison, right? I can't go to the duty belt. I'm not carrying stuff in the back of my patrol car. Everything I've got, is in my soft skills, in those power skills of emotional intelligence and the soft skills of communication and teamwork and influence, right? So one when I got done with the book, that's when I started thinking, this isn't just for correctional officers. Correctional officers are good at it, and my 30 years has taught me to be pretty good at it. So I don't want to just share this with corrections. I want to share it with anybody. If you're a dispatcher and you're dealing with crisis and you're dealing with emotional people on a phone, I think there's things you can get from this book. If you're a police officer, if you're dealing with crisis, emotional people, you need to influence people who are stressed and in crisis. I think this book is good for you. I think anybody, if you work in ambulance, if you're a firefighter, I think if you're in the military and you want to be a good leader, I think you can get things from power skills. I truly do. So I hope you guys will check it out. Next couple of weeks, I just finished up getting it uploaded. The cover's getting done. So my goal is to have it out by the end of May, and I will of course put it out on social media and for all of you guys to see. And please take a look at it and let me know what you think. So, well, that covers quite a bit. I have been busy. I'm not lying. It's been a busy month. I'm ready to take a week off or two and kind of take a break before I head back out teaching some more. So before we go, I'd like to say thank you to Omni. Omni gives you the ability to watch everything everywhere. We have real-time locating systems that we are placing in prisons and jails, and they allow you to alert your staff to heart rates that drop. They allow you to tell where an inmate is every second that he's out there. One of the things that a couple of jails have been really interested in and have adopted is the fact we can do contact tracing. I could show you every inmate that an inmate's been in contact with in the last 24 hours, in the last week, in the last month. So that's something that's come along, and we're getting a lot of response for that. All of this information is clickable, the interface, and it's really easy to run the reports, and it works with your JMS system. So if you'd like more information on Omni, go to OMNI-RTLS. That's OmniRTLS.com. And the RTLS stands for Real-Time Locating System. And if you have any questions, absolutely reach out to Mike at thePrisonOfficer.com. If you have questions about anything I've talked about today, whether it's corrections in ILEETA, whether it's Omni, Pepperball, or it's my new book, feel free to throw an email out there, Mike at thePrisonOfficer.com. I try to get to those as quick as I can. It might be 24 hours. At the most, it's 48, and I will get back with you and let you know. It depends on what I'm doing that day. So for everyone out there, take some time. Go find somebody inside that looks like they need just to talk. Go spend some time and ask them how they're doing, and then stay there for a minute and listen. That's the best thing we can do. Of all my years of corrections, that was what I found helps people the most, is to ask them, how are you doing? And then listen. We get so used to just waving or shaking hands and going down the hall. Spend a moment. Find out that they're okay. Corrections is a tough business. And for some people, and at some times, it's tougher than others. You may have the toughest, meanest, roughest correctional officer, but sometime during his career, you got some downtime, where things aren't going your way, and you need somebody to pick you up a little bit. So reach out there to that officer and see if you can, brighten their day a little bit. Give everybody a smile. Anyway, I appreciate you guys watching theprisonofficer.com. As always, next week I've got Tim Fosnot, or not next week, in 2 weeks after this, there'll be Tim Fosnot on here. He's the owner of Arc Tactical. And then we've already recorded an episode 2 weeks after that with Brian Antonelli, former BOP officer with me. And so we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, but that'll be in 2 episodes from now. But anyway, have a great day, and I will see you later.